How's it going, guys? So in this video, I wanted to make a list for you guys if you wanted to get into bossing and you don't know where to start. Say you've maybe gone to God Wars Dungeon 1, but you didn't really learn anything because all you did is click and kill the boss. But you wanted to move up to these higher level bosses like Telos and things like that. But obviously, you need to learn ability rotations and DPS rotations and all that sort of stuff, how to deal with mechanics in the game. So the list is going to be from the easiest or a recommended starting point, moving up the list, leading you towards more difficult bosses, so that you're going to be able to put these sort of mechanics and stuff into practice and practice your rotations. And then hopefully by the end of it, if you follow it through and stick to all the bosses, you're going to be able to move on to other bosses like Telos and stuff with a lot of practice. Obviously, you're not going to be able to jump straight into that if you kill one of these bosses, one each, and then suddenly you're going to be a pro. PVM does come with a lot of practice. I have a lot of practice still to do myself. Telos is a little bugger that I can't manage to do just yet, but I'm going to be trying. So, hopefully this video helps you guys. Let's get right into it. The first one is going to be Queen Black Dragon. So the QBD, guys, is a pretty good starting point. Now, you're not going to need tremendous level gear and things like that to get here. So like I say, if you are starting off and you haven't quite built up your gear yet, don't worry too much. But obviously, there's going to be some mechanics in this boss that you are going to have to learn to deal with. And the good thing about doing that is it's going to teach you practice to be more aware and what defensives can work in certain sort of situations. Because looking at high level bosses such as Telos, for example, you are going to be using your defensives a hell of a lot to make yourself take less damage throughout that fight, or even reduce your food to not needing any whatsoever. So in Queen Black Dragon, I think it's a good place to start, just because, for example, like I said, the gear requirements and the level requirements. You are going to probably want super anti-fires, but you can do it without. It's all down to kill speed. But obviously, this is to sort of get you into bossing and not so much on getting the fastest kills and making the most money for now. So if you do want to go over Dragonfire Shield and a one-handed crossbow, for example, then obviously feel welcome to do that. The Queen Black Dragon has a few mechanics, one of them being a flame wall, which you can use the game ticks to time and run through to take no damage whatsoever, or you could do how I assume they intended you to have to do it, and go to the specific gap on the wall itself to avoid taking any damage. Another mechanic that it has is it summons minions that do damage to you, so they'll be like spirits that come up and deal damage to you. You can avoid this damage by walking through them and leading their attack to themselves. So that's another thing that you can practice from Queen Black Dragon. Another thing that you can practice is there is a time freeze that the minions will do. So, for example, the summons that she's been summoning throughout the whole kill, one of them will appear on the corner of the sort of island that you're on, I suppose, and it will start talking above its head. Now, he'll tell you that time is short or something like that. You have to kill him quickly enough to stop him from doing the special move, because if he actually works, everything will be frozen except for the Queen Black Dragon, and you'll still take damage after it's all been done, so that can be an insta-kill if you're not careful. And not only that, this is probably going to be your first boss where you're going to have to deal with phasing, so the health will go down to 0. You activate a light and move on to the next phase. So it is a good boss to start off with for practice, and I do recommend that if you are thinking, oh, I want to start somewhere, that you do come to Queen Black Dragon first. You do need a few requirements such as herb law and stuff like that if you want to make it really efficient, but you can do it without. And also you could get yourself that royal crossbow if you don't have anything like that, or better than that yet. The next boss that I wanted to mention on this list was Vindictor. He's from God Wars Dungeon 2. Now, in this fight, you're going to be using defensives to sort of negate the damage from his range attacks. So you're going to have to use prayer switching as well. He does use melee and range. So for the majority of the fight, you are going to have melee prayer on, but you're probably going to want to switch to the range deflect or protect whenever you get him using that range attack. The reason being is, even though you're wearing melee armor most of the time, he is going to deal decent amount of damage through that with his ranged attacks. Now, the thing you can practice with this, however, is using resonance to heal off of the range attacks every second rotation. So what he does once he's on his dragon is he'll attack you once with melee, and then he'll attack you once with range, and then go back to melee, and then he'll fly off and he'll do another rotation. Once he does that range attack, you can switch to a shield and use resonance, and that'll provide you with enough healing to reduce you even needing food really for this kill. However, the second rotation, you're not going to have resonance ready to heal off of it. So it is also a good way to practice using things like devotion or debilitate, things like that, to reduce that damage down to either 0 or half it. Now, that's one thing that you can practice from him. Another one is positioning, because when his dragon flies around the room at the beginning, he puts a big smoke trail down in front of it, and you'll have to move off of this smoke trail to avoid taking constant magic damage. And the way you can do this is by using abilities such as Surge or Bladed Dive, things like that. It's good to use those when he's on the dragon especially, because it'll take you straight to him and it'll remove you out of the smoke at the same time. But if it's just before he gets on the dragon, you can just step out of it to avoid it like that. Now, another thing that this boss to practice, which I found really helpful, was my melee DPS rotation. Now, you can use Zerk at the beginning of this fight and get him down to the phase in where he gets on his dragon pretty quickly using Zerk. Now, obviously, the faster you can do this, the more profit you're going to be getting, so it is a good place to come and practice your melee DPS rotations. Our next method is going to be keeping us inside the God Wars Dungeon 2 still, and it's going to be Hellwhere. Now, when I started doing Hellwhere for the first time, I must admit, it was a bit confusing for me. I don't know why, I just sort of struggled getting kills without using a ton of food. But once I worked out how the mechanics worked and stuff like that, I can now solo Hellwhere with nearly no food whatsoever. So I do think it's a really good boss to jump into to practice once you've sort of learned on a few defensive mechanics and things like that, and abilities. Now, the reason I say this is because, like I said, when I went in, I already knew sort of like the basics of bossing, but I still struggled at keeping my health up without using tons of food. So it forced me to use abilities like Resonance and Devotion and things like that to stop taking as much damage as I could. So I had to utilise these every chance I had. And this way I could get away with not using a ton of food and I could last a lot longer, which increased my profits, obviously. So the reasons that you're going to be having to use these at Hellwhere is he has a lot of sort of special moves, I suppose you could call them, or mechanics even. The first one that you're going to be having to deal with is he jumps back up on his hind legs and he does a big slash, and this does a ton of damage to you if you don't use any abilities to evade it, or if you don't get out of the way. However, what you're going to want to be doing is staying in the way and using Resonance to make that damage heal you instead. And this can reduce your need for food altogether, really, as long as you follow up on the other mechanics as well. So once he's done that big slash, he's then going to attack really quickly, and this will put a bleed on you, so you need to get out of the way and use something like Devotion or even Freedom to take that away. But if Freedom's on cooldown, you can use Devotion and that'll take it away as well. Now, after that, he's going to summon 2 wolves, so it's another couple of minions for you to have to deal with. So it's good to get used to having to deal with extra units and how you can kill them off without having to focus on them and like by themselves completely. For example, the wolves, if you are in melee range to Hellwhere, the wolves will come next to Hellwhere as well to be able to attack you. So if you use things like Chain or Fire Breath or Corruption Blast even, or Detonate, you're going to be able to kill these wolves off while still dealing damage to Hellwhere. So this will stop you from wasting time on having to focus on them and not dealing damage to Hellwhere. Because obviously the faster you kill him, the more profit you're going to make, and also the faster the kill's over, the less health you're going to use throughout that kill. Now, the final mechanic that you're going to be dealing with is he summons like sort of spores around the room that give out acid, I guess, that slow you down so you can't run, and they deal damage over time if you're inside them. You're going to want to be staying out of these, so you're going to have to practice your positioning. However, it does sort of start to fill up the area that you're in quite big, so you need to sort of think about where you're going to go next. The best way to do this is when they come up, just surge into an open space and just carry on attacking them from there. I do recommend using magic for this style, obviously. I just find it a lot easier. And being at range, you don't have to run up into these spores and sort of pull Hellwhere around. So I think this boss is really good for you guys to learn. And I think that you're going to be forced into using a lot of your defensives and learn positioning a lot better. And once you've mastered it, you'll find that switching weapons to shields and switching prayers and all that sort of stuff isn't really that difficult once you've put it into practice at this boss. This was a big milestone for me in PVM, from doing things like just killing Queen Black Dragon where I could more or less just tank the damage anyway, to having to being forced to have to actually put my defensives into use. And it gave me a lot of sort of experience in doing that, and it benefited me a lot in the other PVM situations in the future. So then, now that you've learned the basics of using defensives and you understand how most of them work, and you know about positioning, keep yourself out of the wrong places, for example when you were at Hellwhere, now you can put these into practice. Probably most likely to be more beneficial for you is at a more difficult boss. So the next boss on this list is going to be Kalphite King. Now don't think that he's just jumped from a solo boss in the God Wars dungeon all the way up to a group boss at Kalphite King. It is good to be able to learn group PVM, because a lot of your money is going to be coming from group PVM later on. For example, Angel of Death. Now, the good thing about doing Kalphite King to practice is going to be, one, you've already learned a few basics anyway, but he's going to push you into using those a lot more efficiently, timing them, things like that. For example, during his magic phase, you're going to need to predict when he's going to use stuns, so you can anticipate that, so that he doesn't stun you and then deal a ton of damage to you. And you're going to learn in his melee phase that you're going to need to use freedom to remove bleeds, or use devotion to reduce the damage of the bleeds. Now, not only that, he has lots of sort of special attacks for each phase, so you're going to have to learn to deal with those as they come at you, and it'll just give you a better reaction time to certain things and let you focus more on what do I need to do next, so you're thinking ahead. So the abilities that King Black Dragon can use is an insta-kill ability. So he's going to turn whoever's tanking or whoever has aggro at the time green, and whoever doesn't have the aggro is going to have to provoke him off of this person, and you can use this hit that he's going to hit you with instead as a heal, and this will probably most likely full heal you anyway. So you can use your resonance there to get used to reducing some damage for yourselves by healing up. Also, he's going to summon minions at certain points of the kill. You can either, if you have enough DPS, ignore the minions and just DPS them down. However, if you're learning, I do recommend you kill the minions off. Maybe have the tank focus on the Kalphite King still, and have whoever's doing DPS kill off all the minions, just to clear out the battlefield for you guys. You're going to have to learn prayer switching, because he changes from all of the combat styles, from melee to range to magic, and it's all completely random. There's no specific sort of style that he's going to come with or start with next. And after that, he's going to use in the melee phase things like bleeds, like slaughter. So if you move after he's used that, then you're going to take a lot more damage. However, he does it on purpose. For example, he'll put a bleed on you, and then he'll use the charge ability, which he runs towards like any side of the arena that you're in, and you're always in front of him. So if you have to move out of the way, you've got a bleed on you, it's going to triple the damage. So you're going to need to make sure you're paying attention to things like that, so you can freedom it as you run away, or use devotion. Otherwise, you're going to probably take a ton of damage, and it could result in you dying. So, like I say, this boss is going to push you into a completely new boundaries, especially in the way of group bossing as well. You're all going to have different roles. So if you start off learning the tank role, you're just there getting whacked away by the Kalphite King. You're going to have to learn to use your defensives in a rotation where you're not wasting them. You can reduce damage, and you can get through the kill without eating all your food. If you're then the next kill on DPS role, you're going to be practicing your DPS rotations as well, to make sure you can get as much damage output as you can to speed up these kills. Make sure your tank doesn't have to spend ages having to deal with all these attacks that he's getting thrown his way. So, like I say, the Kalphite King is really good for you to practice, and it's going to push you up towards that next ladder of bossing as well. So, looking at the next boss after Kalphite King, you've already done quite a difficult boss here, and your PVM skills are definitely going to be getting better than when you started at the beginning. So don't panic too much when I tell you that the next boss that I recommend is going to be soloing Nex. Don't think, I can't solo Nex. Now, you're watching this video, you might still be thinking about learning PVM altogether. So obviously you're going to want to be learning the earlier bosses first, but once you progress to be able to do Kalphite King, you are going to be able to do Nex afterwards. I promise you, you'll be able to put anything that you've learned into practice, and make a few adjustments for next. Obviously, the fight's a little bit different than other fights in the game. There's a lot of mechanics, there's a lot of phases, and I will quickly sort of touch on those, but I'm not going to go too into depth on it. Now, this section could end up being a guide if I did, so I don't want to do that. It's not a guide whatsoever. It's just sort of letting you know that next would be your sort of next step to look at. So, the reason that I think you should probably be moving on to things like soloing next now is because, especially if you are soloing, if you jump into the next instance, you're going to be thrown with a lot of new sort of mechanics that you have to deal with. You're going to have prayer switching, you're going to have using your defensives, you're going to have making sure you can do enough DPS to get through stuff. You need to pay attention to the text above her head to let you know, what's happening next. You need to kill the minions around the room at the right time to make sure you can sort of change to the next phase. Otherwise, you're going to be dying on stood there waiting for it to change, and it's not even going to change. You need to rotate your defensives being freedom and anticipate to make sure you don't get stunned and pulled in the first phase. The second phase, you've got to pay attention for the shadows on the floor. Now, they're going to do a lot of damage if you don't pay attention, but again, Nex will always say something above her head before she does give you these shadows. In the blood phase, you need to practice your DPS rotations, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to do enough damage to sort of kill her off before she does another siphon and heals her health up again. There is other ways to do it, for example using Onslaught, but even then you're going to need to do things like put a bleed on the minions that she summons, or make sure that you're not using Onslaught too late or too early. You still need to avoid the blood sacrifice that she's going to ask for. So there's things like that. In the ice phase, you're going to be put inside a prison where you can't use any abilities except freedom, but if you use anticipate before it, you can then get your shield out, use resonance, stop yourself from taking so much damage, make sure your health's full. And a big problem that I had when I was learning Nex is because I was focusing so much on all the mechanics, I kept letting my prayer drop, and suddenly I was dying, and there was so much to sort of look at on the micromanagement side of it. But Nex is such a good boss for you to learn solo, because if you only get to phase 2, the shadow phase, it's not a big problem, because you can have the practice mode on as well if you wanted to. And each time you're going back into that fight, if you get that little mistake that you made the first time, you're going to progress a little bit further. And even though you haven't completed the kill just yet, you're going to get that sense of reward, like, yes, I can finally do the shadow phase, and I can finally do the blood phase. Trust me, when you get past that blood phase, it's going to be absolutely amazing feeling that I've actually just done the blood phase. I've been here for hours and hours, and I've done it. If you're one of those guys that, you just do it on your first try and you know exactly what you're doing, then good for you. I took about 50 tries. Now, going on to the ice phase again, she's going to use things like icicles around her that are going to stun you, so you need to sort out your positioning, things like that. And then on the final phase, the Zaras phase, she's going to use prayer switching, but it's going to be deflect curses just like yourselves. Now, the problem with this is, if you're using melee and she protects from melee, you're going to have to switch weapons, so you're going to learn weapon switching it next as well. And again, in the Zaras phase, she can use soul split, so you have to be able to be good at DPS in here, because if she's healing up more than you can do damage, it's going to extend that kill too much where you're going to be there for ages, use up all your resources, and if you use, say, maybe more than 1 or 2 overload doses during this kill, it might not be worth it for you in the end of it. So there's a lot of stuff to touch up on after you even sort of got the kill down and you can finish it. There's a lot you can go into it and sort of perfect throughout the kills, to the point where you can go in and you don't need a yak, you can use a nihil to increase your DPS, things like that. So next is the next boss that I do recommend you do. It is a difficult boss to do, but like I say, try it. And obviously once you've done Nex, you've pretty much got yourself to the point where you can learn almost any boss now. You know all your DPS rotations, you know your defensives, you know positioning, you know to pay attention to the boss and what they're saying, what they're telling you, what they're doing, so you know to sort of like preemptively ready yourself for the next bit. You know about phasing, timing it so you're ready for the next phase, and things like that. So Nex does teach you a hell of a lot of stuff that you're going to be able to use in pretty much any boss in the future. So one last boss that I wanted to throw into the mix, guys. It's probably about the same sort of level as Nex, maybe even Kalphite King. The fight is a lot different from those two bosses. However, you're going to be using the same sort of ideas and your way of your abilities and defensives and stuff like that. And that was Araxor. Now, obviously, once you get to Nex and Araxor, you're basically reaching towards the high-end bossing anyway, especially for soloing, obviously. You're going to be making a lot of money soloing these bosses, but I thought it deserved a spot at the end here. I learned a lot from Araxor just because of the whole fight. You're going to be looking at stuff like using your defensives, anticipating freedom to avoid the special attacks that he's going to use on you. Paying attention to what special attacks he's actually using. For example, if he uses the web, you don't want to be in Zerk hitting him for 10Ks, because that's going to reflect at a higher percent than just the 100% of your damage. It's going to do a hell of a lot more damage to you when you're on higher enrages, and it could instantly kill you. Now, another point of this boss is he will throw out like a little insta-kill spider, and it just looks like another attack, but if you look carefully, you can see the difference in it. So noticing things like that, minor details, stuff like that will help you out as well, because you'll notice little things that you're not going to be noticing. Another boss that will teach you about minions as well, as he summons spider minions on that path when that's open. Now, this boss is a lot different in the way that he does have 3 different paths. 2 are always open, 1's always shut, but the fight changes depending on the paths itself, and there's a lot to sort of learn about those paths. So I do recommend that you do look at Araxor as well. A lot of money is to be made here as well, just for you guys that are completely after that money, because I know that's what a lot of people are after, whereas I am after that money, but I do thoroughly enjoy doing bosses like Araxor and Nex, and sort of having to think about what I can do next and how I can perfect the kills, because that's a lot of what I'm doing at the moment. I can get the bosses down, I can kill them, but I need to perfect them in a way that I can reduce my kill times and how much food I'm using, things like that. So guys, I think Araxor is definitely a good place to put your practice in for DPS and stuff like that. Once you reach Araxi on the final phase, now this is something that I think is absolutely brilliant for teaching you things like prayer switching, even prayer flicking if you're looking at meleeing in the melee range of Araxor with that scythe. So for example, using Drygors, Araxi's going to be hitting you with melee and with magic, and it is possible to prayer switch it even though the melee attack's instant. It's because you stay on the melee, protect from prayer, and as soon as she uses a magic attack, you switch to magic and then instantly switch back to melee. So that's another thing that you can practice. So it's just an overall good boss to put in your defensives into a practice, your prayer switching into practice, a lot of awareness to keep an eye out for the special attacks, and your DPS rotations. It's just such a good boss to put into a sort of practice for that. And once you've done that, you'll be able to move on to pretty much any boss in the game once you've put practice into it. So I hope this has helped you out quite a lot, guys. So that's the last boss that I wanted to mention in this video, guys. I do hope that if you haven't started doing bossing yet in RuneScape 3, that you do, because this game is a lot based on bossing, and the way that they've got the game to sit at the moment, they can actually release some amazing bosses with the mechanics that they can do with all the different skills that they've put in. Now, that's the great thing about EOC and RuneScape 3, the sort of variation of bosses and mechanics they can allow us to have. It is a lot of fun doing these bosses, especially the high-end ones. I spend hours and hours doing Telos, and well, I mean, I think I've got up to 300% in rage, and I've probably died about 500 times, maybe not quite that much, but you know, I'm definitely not doing too well. I'm practicing though, hoping for that big drop one day. And that's another thing about doing bossing in this game. Getting those big drops is such a reward, especially when you've been grinding out a boss for ages, and you finally learned it, and then you do your first like 10 kills, 20 kills, and you get that drop it next, you get a Tova plate body or something, and you're just absolutely buzzing, and it's going to just give you that sense of rewarding feeling that you've put all that practice in, and now you can make this money from next, and you can just do it, and once you've perfected it, it's just brilliant. So, as always, guys, I do hope this video has been some help to you. And I do hope that you can now go out there and kill all these bosses and make yourself some bank. Let me know if it has helped. Tell me, even in the future, if you've watched this and you're coming back after you've learned a boss, that you've done it. And let me know how it's going for you. And, as always, guys, see you later. Bye.